The jungle has a way of keeping its secrets. It doesn't warn you when something is about to go wrong. It doesn't shift, or whisper, or give you even a moment to reconsider your next step. It simply exists. Dense, green, quiet, and you only understand its indifference once you've already crossed a line you didn't realize was there. On April 1st, 2014, two young women stepped onto a trail in the Panamanian highlands with no reason to think the day would be anything other than a simple hike. The morning was calm, predictable, the kind of day travelers welcome without a second thought. And nothing about it hinted at the story that would unfold over the next 10 days. One that would grow into one of the most unsettling mysteries the region has ever faced. Later that evening, their phones attempted calls to emergency services. By the next morning, the girls were gone. And 10 days after that, long after hope should have faded, someone began taking photographs deep inside the jungle in the early hours of the morning. Photographs that revealed almost nothing clearly, yet remain some of the most haunting pieces of evidence in any missing person case. This is what the forest returned, and what it never explained. Kris Kremers and Lisanne Froon were Dutch university students who had traveled to Panama for 6 weeks of volunteer work. They were at an age when everything still feels wide open, when new places don't feel dangerous, only exciting. Their time in Boquete, a small highland town surrounded by cloud forests, was supposed to be the beginning of a long list of adventures. The town is the kind of place where mornings are cool, where mist slips between the hills, where tourists feel welcome almost instantly. Kris and Lisanne stayed with a host family, taught local children, explored nearby trails, and took pictures of everything that fascinated them. The people were friendly. The town felt safe. It didn't take long for them to settle in. On April 1st, they had the day off and decided to hike El Pianista, a trail well known to locals and tourists alike. The route begins gently and climbs steadily toward the Continental Divide. Most people walk up to the viewpoint, take in the scenery, and return the same way. Beyond that point, the trail changes dramatically and becomes much less forgiving. The women set out around 11 a.m., carrying only what they needed for a short outing: some water, snacks, their phones, and a Canon camera. And for a while, the day unfolded exactly as expected. The early photos from the camera show two friends enjoying their time, crossing small streams, pausing on wooden bridges, smiling into the sun. Nothing in those images suggests anything was wrong. Near the top, Kris stands on a narrow section of the trail. The vegetation behind her is denser, the light a little dimmer, the mood of the landscape subtly different. But none of that shows in her expression. To her, it was just another moment worth capturing. At 1:54 p.m., the final daylight photo was taken. Kris sits on a branch above a trickling stream, smiling. It would be the last clear record of them, before everything changed. What happened between that last photograph and the attempts to call emergency services remains unknown, but something occurred, something sudden enough to push them into panic or confusion. At 4:39 p.m., one of their phones dialed 112, the Dutch emergency number, but the call didn't connect. 12 minutes later, another attempt was made to contact 911. The call went through for only 2 seconds before dropping. Not long enough for anyone to speak or hear anything meaningful. There were no follow-up texts, no voice messages, nothing that explained the situation they were now in. Just silence between those attempts. Their host family didn't worry that first night. travelers often returned later than planned, especially on beautiful days. But by the following morning, when their beds were still empty, concern became something much heavier. It was clear something had gone wrong. The search effort began quickly. By midday on April 2nd, local guides, police, volunteers, and search dogs were already moving up the trail. Helicopters scanned the area from above. People who knew the terrain intimately called out the women's names as they pushed deeper into the forest. In most cases like this, the first day of searching reveals something. A footprint, a scrap of fabric, a broken branch signaling a fall. But that day on El Pianista, nothing appeared. The trail looked untouched. No signs suggested the women had wandered off or encountered trouble. It was as if they had walked beyond the limit of visibility and simply vanished from the landscape. The phone logs added a faint outline to the unfolding timeline. On April 2nd, more attempts were made to call emergency services. On April 3rd, several additional tries. Then a single attempt on April 4th, and another on April 5th. Every attempt failed. None connected long enough for help to arrive. On April 6th, both phones were briefly turned on, perhaps to check battery or search for signal, but only Lisanne's phone remained operational afterward. Kris's phone died soon after that day. Then came April 11th, 10 days after the women had disappeared. Lisanne's phone powered on again, and someone attempted her PIN code. It was entered incorrectly. They tried again, and it was wrong a second time. The detail is small, but it carries weight. Either the person holding the phone didn't know the code, or was too weak, or too disoriented to recall it. After that, the phone was never unlocked again. Someone was still alive on April 11th, but the forest remained silent. For weeks, the search continued. It expanded, then contracted, then shifted into something slower and more desperate. Families waited. Investigators reviewed maps repeatedly. Guides returned to the trail again and again, unable to shake the feeling that something had been overlooked. Then, on June 14th, a local woman walking along the Culebra River found a blue backpack resting on a rock near the water. The bag was surprisingly clean and dry. Inside were the women's passports, money, sunglasses, 2 bras, both phones, and their camera. When investigators recovered the photos, the timeline became even stranger. The last daylight photo remained the same. April 1st, 1:54 p.m. The next image was taken April 8th at 1:20 a.m., a full week later, and long after any realistic expectation of survival in those conditions. Someone turned the camera back on in absolute darkness, and then, over the next 3 hours, they pressed the shutter nearly 90 times. Most of the images reveal little more than what the flash could catch: wet leaves, tangled branches, the suggestion of a steep slope or rock face. A few shots appear deliberate, almost like the person behind the camera was trying to capture specific reference points. In one image, a piece of plastic material tied to a branch is illuminated. It might have been left by the women or by searchers. It's impossible to say. Many believe it might be Kris, though the picture is too unclear for certainty. What the photos do show, unmistakably, is effort. Someone was trying to use the flash for visibility, for orientation, or perhaps simply to stay grounded in the overwhelming darkness. Around 4 a.m., the photos stop entirely. The camera was never used again. As June passed into July and then August, the forest began returning pieces of the women's remains, but not as answers, more like scattered fragments of a story that refused to come together. A hiking boot was found first, with a foot still inside. It was identified as Lisanne's. Later, a fragment of Kris's pelvic bone was discovered along the same river. More remains followed. Ribs, parts of a femur, even teeth, spread across a wide area, carried and reshaped by water and time. Forensic testing showed the bones were weathered and sun-bleached. Some had fractures with edges that appeared unusually clean, while others bore no visible trauma at all. Very little clothing was found. The official forensic findings were restrained. The cause of death could not be determined. Nothing in the remains proved foul play. Nothing definitively supported an accident. The evidence was too incomplete to draw a firm conclusion. Theories. In the absence of definitive answers, 3 main theories have persisted. Theory 1. Lost in the jungle. This is the official explanation. According to this view, the women passed the continental divide, descended into rough, disorienting terrain, and eventually became trapped in an area where navigation would have been nearly impossible. One may have been injured early, the other stayed, trying to help. The phone logs and night photos support a prolonged struggle for survival. Still, this theory leaves unanswered questions. It doesn't explain the 8 days of silence before the camera came back to life, the pristine condition of the backpack when it was found, or the wide scattering of remains. Theory 2. Foul play. Some locals later reported seeing unfamiliar men near the trail around the time the women disappeared. A guide claimed he spotted 2 women matching their description at a time that didn't fit the camera timeline, and the condition of the backpack, clean, dry, intact, has led some to speculate that someone placed it intentionally where it would be found. But there is no forensic evidence supporting violence, no defensive injuries on the bones, no confirmed witnesses who saw anything suspicious, nothing that turns rumor into fact. Theory 3. A prolonged struggle to survive. In this scenario, one of the women might have been injured shortly after they were lost. The other survived for days, weakening, but still moving. The night photos could be her attempt to navigate or document surroundings in the darkness. And the incorrect pin attempt on April 11th becomes a heartbreaking detail. Someone's still trying to reach help, even in the final stages of exhaustion. This theory fits more comfortably with the physical evidence, but still leaves gaps, especially the long, unexplained window between the last daylight photo and the first night image. And that gap remains the central mystery. What happened between April 1st and April 8th? The forest offers no explanation. The last photograph, taken at 4 a.m. on April 8th, shows only a small pocket of jungle illuminated by the flash. Branches, a bit of rock, nothing identifiable. It provides no clues, but its timestamp carries the weight of the entire case. 7 days after they vanished, someone was still alive, still moving, still trying to understand the darkness around them. 3 days later, the final phone attempt was made. Weeks after that, the river returned pieces of their remains. The rest stayed where the forest left it. People still hike El Pianista today. They walk the same trail, cross the same streams, reach the same continental divide where Kris and Lisanne took their last photograph. Most turn back at that point. The ones who continue often don't realize what happened there. Locals still urge visitors to stay on marked trails, not out of superstition, but because they've seen what happens when people underestimate the terrain. The case remains officially unsolved. Dutch authorities closed the investigation in 2015, citing insufficient evidence to determine a cause of death. The Panamanian prosecutor's office reached the same conclusion. The families never received the answers they were searching for. Kris and Lisanne walked onto that trail on April 1st, 2014, expecting to return home for dinner. Instead, they left behind a backpack, scattered remains, and 90 photographs taken in the deepest hours of the morning, 7 days after they disappeared. The phone logs stop on April 11th. The camera goes silent on April 8th. And everything that happened between 1:54 p.m. on April 1st and 1:20 a.m. on April 8th remains unknown. The evidence tells us they were alive far longer than expected, but it doesn't tell us why, or how, or what those final days were truly like. Some mysteries don't get solved. They just stop.